One of the toughest things about living in fellowship with other believers is also one of the most beautiful things about the church. We are all different. Sometimes these differences complement each other. For example, my husband is strong in many of my areas of weakness, and I have strengths in some of his areas of weakness. Our differences make us a stronger unit. But sometimes our differences don't complement each other. They conflict with each other. And in those instances, our differences cause disagreements. Hi, I'm Shannon Lenz, your spiritual fitness coach. As we finish up studying Acts 15 today, we see in verses 36 through 41 that Paul and Barnabas had a sharp disagreement. The Jerusalem Council's decree to Gentile believers had been delivered to a gathering in Antioch, and Paul and Barnabas had remained there for several days to continue teaching and preaching. But Paul soon felt that it was time to move on. He said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaimed the word of the Lord and see how they are." Barnabas agreed to go and wanted to take John Mark with them. And that was the problem. You see, John Mark had accompanied Paul and Barnabas during their first missionary journey, but he didn't complete the trip. In Acts 13:13, we see that John Mark left them in Pamphylia and decided to return to Jerusalem. We don't really know the reason for John Mark's departure, but it's clear from today's reading that Paul considered it a desertion. In Acts 15:38, Paul didn't think that it was wise to bring someone along on such an important mission who hadn't proven himself to be faithful. He wanted to take along someone they could count on to see the work through to the end. Barnabas, on the other hand, insisted that they bring John Mark along. Many commentators point out that we know from Colossians 4:10 that John Mark and Barnabas were cousins. So it's possible that he favored John Mark because of their family bond. But it's also true that Acts 4:36 tells us that Barnabas means son of encouragement. True to his name, Barnabas was willing to extend forgiveness to John Mark and give him another chance. Now, whenever there's a fight, we all want to know who's right and who's wrong. But the Bible doesn't take sides on this issue. When Luke wrote this down, he simply stated the facts. Paul didn't trust John Mark and didn't want him to come along, but Barnabas did. So Paul and Barnabas decided to part ways. Barnabas took John Mark with him, and they sailed off to Cyprus. Paul reversed his route from his first missionary journey and retraced his steps through Syria and Cilicia with a new ministry partner, Silas. Acts 15 verses 22 and 32 mentions Silas as a leading man among the brothers and as a prophet. Silas would prove to be a valuable partner in the gospel to Paul. But John Mark would also take the second chance that Barnabas had given him and prove himself faithful in the end. We know that Paul and John Mark eventually reconciled because in Colossians 4:10, Paul gave instructions to the Colossian church to welcome John Mark as a brother in Christ if he ever came to visit them. Paul and Barnabas had a serious disagreement that led to them parting ways for a while. But that didn't slow down God's mission at all. In fact, the gospel actually spread further and more quickly because now there were 2 missionary teams instead of just one. Churches were strengthened by both missionary teams to the glory of God. The reality is, even though we are united in Christ, on this side of heaven, we will still have our differences with our brothers and sisters in Christ. But we should never let our disagreements distract us from our mission to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with the lost world. And whenever possible, we should be like Paul, Barnabas, and John Mark. We should learn to forgive, reconcile, and restore broken relationships so that we can continue to be united in our work for the Lord. Here's your challenge for today. Take the first step in restoring a broken relationship that you have with another believer. Pray for them, confess your role in the disagreement, and seek forgiveness. If at all possible, set aside your differences and reconcile for His glory and for your own good.